Well, folks, in today's video, we're going to be completely repainting this HO scale diesel locomotive into the diesel locomotive of my dreams. Since the last time you all saw this thing, I did a lot of work on it. It turned out to be in need of a lot more maintenance than I originally thought, so I actually ended up completely disassembling the locomotive. I cleaned and re-lubricated all the parts. I gave it a brand new motor, a brand new flywheel. I completely rewired it and gave it a whole bunch of lead weights because it hardly had any pulling capacity. It could literally only haul like 3 cars because it's only 4-wheel drive. So yeah, and I actually managed to turn this thing into a decent runner. So if I give it a little bit of power here, you can see it's fairly smooth, it's fairly quiet. It's overall just running quite nicely. I'm pretty happy with how it's going right now. So yeah, and this is with only about half the weight in it. It doesn't make much of a difference now, but when it's hauling cars, it will. I just removed the weights temporarily so we can paint this thing up a little bit easier. I'll open this thing up right here just to give you a better look at exactly what I did too. So the flywheel that was in this thing, it was really small and it was off-centered, so it was making the engine vibrate a lot. And the motor was actually a decent motor, but it just wasn't as big as I wanted. It wasn't super powerful, so I put a bigger motor in here and a nice big Athearn flywheel, so this thing can, even if the electrical system, the pickups are not working perfectly, this will keep it moving. So that's really what I was aiming for. This wiring is eventually going to go, but the wiring was not flawless in it either. It had a lot of really weird things about it, so like a connector. It might have had a capacitor too, I'm not entirely sure, but I didn't really like how it was set up, so I rewired it. But eventually we're going to put DCC and lighting and all that other stuff in this thing, so this is just temporary. But yeah, we got a really good basis for a locomotive. The guts of this thing are really good. But today we're going to repaint it from its current paint scheme into the HCW white and green paint scheme. So yeah, it should be fun. Anyway, let's get started here. I don't think that this was the locomotive's original paint scheme. Well, it's now some time later. It looks like this, in fact, did have a different paint scheme before, but it doesn't matter. It doesn't seem to want to come off either, but you know what? It's a fine paint scheme. Once we throw enough paint over it, it shouldn't matter. I'm just going to go rinse the shell off, and we should be in business. Well, it's now time to paint this thing. I got most of the other paints off of it, or whatever paint's left is really thin and smooth, so not too concerned about that. I'm going to be doing this kind of backwards. Typically I'd put the white first and then follow it up with the green. But in this case, with how the locomotive was painted, trying to tape off this area to protect the white would be really hard. So I think what I'm going to try to do is paint it green and then try to protect the green and then spray the white paint over. So I'm doing it kind of backwards, but hopefully it will turn out well. Maybe I'll pay a price for it. I don't know, but we're just going to go at this. I've already shaken up the can really well. I'm just going to throw a nice light coat. It's okay taking your time with this stuff. Well, here's the shell after the first coat of paint. I think it's looking pretty good, so I'm going to tape it up and add on the white paint on the top. We'll see how that goes. I have a feeling it's going to bleed through, but hopefully if I seal it up well enough, yeah, we'll be all right. So let's give that a go. Moment of truth time. I feel like this is going to have bled through, but yeah, what can you do? Well, I'm genuinely amazed. The paint didn't really seem to bleed, so that was lucky. Well, it's now been a few days since you all last saw this model, and as you can see, I got quite a bit done on it. I got the entire bottom of the chassis painted, so that's all taken care of. You can see the trucks and everything else are all painted up. I got handrails on the model. That was a pretty difficult part of making it. I had to probably burn about 30 holes into the model and do just a lot of playing around with wire and stuff to get this to all work. I got the windows back in, I got the lead weights back in. So all in all, this thing is pretty much complete. There are a few modifications. I want to paint up the handrails a little better, and also the engine doesn't have any numbers on it. I want to find an accurate way to put numbers on the model, so I'm going to have to figure that out. But yeah, otherwise this thing is done, and I have to say I'm pretty happy with it. It's not flawless, but it's to a level of detail which I'm satisfied with. Anyway, I think there's only one thing left to do. Why don't we hook this thing up to some cars and the steam locomotive and run it as a complete train? I think that's what it's worthy to do. One thing I also forgot to mention is I took a metallic pen and painted up the steps on the model too, and I think they turned out pretty well. Anyway, let's run this thing as a train now. Well, here it is, the entire train. I can't tell you how happy it makes me to see this entire thing all together. I know that the steam train is definitely the star of the show on this train, but it's just not the same without the diesel, and I gotta say, just seeing it here with the diesel really brings the whole train to life. I mean, I'm just really happy with how this turned out. Anyway, let's run this thing as an entire train. Let's see. I think this is gonna look pretty cool. Hopefully it will work well. Yes, look at that. A whole train. Seems like it's definitely struggling a bit. The diesel is doing most of the work right now. However, the steam locomotive is also pulling, since the diesel on its own is actually not capable of pulling this entire thing. But it's definitely taking a lot of load off the steam locomotive, since the diesel is actually revving a bit higher. So there is a little bit of wheel slip, but overall I think it's working quite nicely. This is a fairly heavy train too. A lot of these cars I added a lot of details to. Like I extended the roof lines just to make them look a little bit more authentic, but I did that with wall plaster, so it actually did end up adding a lot of weight to this train. So the fact that it's pulling it like this is it's pretty good, and the way it looks is just terrific. I actually find the diesel really balances out the train too, just because the steam locomotive is a fair bit smaller than the cars, and the diesel's sort of in between, so I find having the diesel between them, I don't know, it kind of just makes the train, the transition between the steam engine and the cars, I just find it looks a bit smoother. So yeah, that's another nice thing about having the diesel. Still all going to need some work. I still want to add sound to the steam locomotive. The steam locomotive still needs to be renumbered. Diesel still needs a fair bit of work, and I'd like to do more upgrades on the cars. But yeah, all in all, I pretty much have the entire train now. So yeah, in fact, I do have the entire train now. All the cars, the diesel, and the steam engine. Whole lot. So yeah, really happy with that. Well, I think that's going to be it for today's video. I hope you all enjoyed. And with that, I'd like to thank you all so much for watching.